I'm really honoured to be here, and it's very moving that we were able to get from an idea like let's pull this event together to doing it so quickly. And thanks everyone for your fantastic work behind the scenes. My background is not in theatre, but I know enough about theatre to know that there's a saying which is never put a gun on the wall in the first act unless you're planning to use it, in the third. And it drives me crazy. This here, Can you feel that? Do you actually feel it vibrating? It's amazing. It's sound moving, and sometimes ideas do the same thing to you. Do you sometimes get that? Like sometimes an idea just like makes you kind of shake. I believe that's why TED, in many ways, that's kind of why TED exists, and I really honor the people who have been creating that, because some ideas really do deserve to be shared, because they should be resonating with more people. When Chris Wink said to me some months back at this dinner, he said to me, we've got this idea and it's called a Provocateur. I said, whoa. And I had that shaking thing. I said, hang on, this you've just put a word to something I've been thinking about for so many years. And what is this concept? We've got to talk about this. And I can remember the dinner in the room. It just completely took over the conversation. And this presentation I want to take you through is really an outcome of that evening and an outcome of many, many different things that I've been working on. So what is a provocateur? Firstly, it's a little messy, isn't it? The slide's a little messy. Your brain's going, hang on, couldn't he clean that up a little? Is that the screen? Provocateurs are a little bit messy, and the brain doesn't like messiness so much. It kind of likes certainty and order. In fact, every time you see a little order, a little certainty, you get a little reward, a little dopamine in the brain. A little uncertainty really is not good for your brain. A little uncertainty, your brain gets very uncomfortable. It's one of the things that creates what's called an away or a threat response. So I'm sorry to tell you I'm going to make you a little uncomfortable here and there in this session, perhaps, even just with my slide. What's a provocateur? A provocateur, in both the person and the idea, it's a novel intrusion that invites thinking and inspires action. And it's like this agent of positive change. A provocateur is kind of this agent that makes positive things happen. And it's very meaningful for me to talk about this idea of a provocateur at a TEDx event, because I believe that pretty much everyone I run into in the TED community are actually provocateurs. And they're people who are doing something important that they feel passionate about, that maybe no one else is talking about, and that they feel is an idea that deserves to be shared, that should be resonating amongst people. Now, I have a bit of a problem, though, with this, and that is that I've noticed that provocateurs seem to emerge in spite of their education, not because of it. Have you noticed that? Like when you talk to the people who create great things, it's really not because of their education, is it? They're these people on the side that happened, in spite of kind of what they learned. And certainly for me, if you looked at my educational history, you'd say, David, you're supposed to be a doctor, right? That's, you did all that, you did this, then that, and your mother put you through all the right schools and all the right things, and you're supposed to be a doctor. And, what happened? How come you didn't? Well, it was interesting without diverging too much. In my teens, I discovered this whole idea of self-awareness and mindfulness and understanding the role, the will plays in the world. And it really changed my future for me in my teens. So anyway, we educate for conformity, not innovation. So I think that the provocateurs who present at TED, who are out changing the world, are very few and far between. And they're just literally nowhere near enough of them. Now, is that just my feeling? Yes, it's just my feeling. What's my data on this? Well, I saw a study just in the last few weeks out in Brazil. They're looking at leadership. So I work with organizations, and they're looking at leadership. And they've said in Brazil they only have about 33% of the leaders that they need to actually take people forward. There was a study published last year which said that improving the quality of leadership development in organizations was the second most important thing that they had to do in organizations. And when you look at organizations overall, you'll see that there's this big lack of what they call leadership. And what is leadership? Actually, leaders are provocateurs, because when I talk about provocateurs, I don't just mean the kind of jester. I actually mix a lot of grit in there when I talk about provocateur. It's someone who's a positive change agent and doesn't just dance in like an artist and flit away. Actually, they're committed to the change happening, and that's where the hard bit kind of starts. So I'd like to my question is, how do we actually create these provocateurs? It's because I believe that we need a lot more of them than we currently have. We certainly need them in organizations and in institutions. But we need them at every level of society, and they shouldn't really be accidents. Now, let me give you a little sort of qualifier, though, about Provocateur. I was walking around, and I always see strange things wherever I go, because my accent is Australian, if you're wondering, and I do live between Sydney and New York, and I have for about 7 years, and I also teach in Europe, and spend about a month or two in Asia, and I'm always seeing things with fresh eyes, and it's wonderfully enriching when I get over jet lag. It's wonderfully enriching. And I was walking through Soho last week on the way to Blue Man. I saw these 3 posters. Anyone see them? A lot of people saw them, so it's really working, right? It's amazing. 3 posters. Now, a provocateur, to my mind, a provocateur wouldn't look at this. Let me tell you what they wouldn't do. They wouldn't look at this and go, wow, really emotive images, one after the other. That really gets attention, which it does. They wouldn't look at this and go, let's build triple billboards next to the freeways. Let's make a whole lot more money by building triple billboards. We don't want people to see the sky. Let's do that. I don't want people, that's not a provocateur for me. A provocateur for me goes, wow, so many people really noticed that. It's amazing. The 3 images there are all of car crashes. Isn't that amazing? The thing that really gets us upset and really gets our attention most, car accidents. I think I want to rethink how automobiles function and the entire mode of transportation that we use. That's the kind of insight, which is a much more high-level insight that I believe we need to be thinking about. So provocateur for me isn't just innovation for the sake of innovation or the sake of making money. It's actually about an agent of positive change. Positive change means we're improving the world somehow on some level. So that's my qualifier there. Okay, how do we create provocateurs? Angela, you just started talking about that very question. How do we give people grit? And in some ways, there's a part of it is similar. I've been thinking about this, and part of my day job is creating provocateurs in organizations. That's kind of what I do a little bit of. And I've been thinking about this, and I think that there is one simple answer, and it's building on what Ken said, so Ken Robinson. It has to be part of the curriculum. It must be part of the curriculum. If something is not in the curriculum, it doesn't get attention. And as so Ken Robinson said before, it needs to be up there. And I deeply, deeply honour the vision that the founders of Blue School have, in that they're really using the school as a lab to see what's possible in education. And just in the last few months, they actually hired someone to be the provocateur in the class. And I'll share with you shortly one of the provocations that they put together that's been quite magical. So it has to be part of the curriculum. It also does need to be a way of teaching things. But if it's not like in the week or in every second week at the most, who's going to learn it? Attention does change the brain. You'll hear more from Dan Siegel, I'm sure, on that coming up. If we don't pay attention to equality, it doesn't develop. So what do we teach them? What does a provocateur know how to do? I think that there are 3 fundamental qualities that provocateurs need to develop. I base this insight from my work in the NeuroLeadership Institute, where we have many, many, many scientists that we're drawing on, collaborating with, gathering for summits each year, talking about what is it that creates a great leader and what creates innovation. There are 3 qualities that are very important. I'll go through each. Noticing subtle signals, being okay with uncertainty, and then actually understanding change. Noticing subtle signals is definitely one of the keys. The research on insight has been very exciting in the last 5 years. The research on insight says that you have insights, by the way, and you solve about 60% of problems with this moment of insight, is what we see. You have insights when you're able to notice what are called subtle signals, and they're literally weak activations. Think of a cell phone. A cell phone is very, very quiet if you're at a loud party. And many of the insights we have are actually very quiet connections. They might be a link between a few million or billion circuits, not a much higher level that's normally going on. So you literally only hear them when you're in the shower, exercising or walking, because the rest of your brain's quiet enough to actually notice them. So we actually can teach that. I was at the art gallery the other day. There's this magical gallery down the road. These 2 women are playing music that they have to play together, the hourglass. It's quite phenomenal. But I was standing there with my daughter, Trinity, and we went right up to a painting. And out of nowhere, we just both went up to the painting, and I said, just stare at the painting. I said, can you see my hand over here? I said, don't look at it. I said, can you see my hand over here? And she said, yeah, I can. I said, what about over here? Can you see it? She said, yeah, I can, even though I'm looking ahead. I said, that's your peripheral vision. Your mind can actually go almost 180 degrees. Your eyes take in. You don't focus on it. But if something strange is happening in your peripheral vision, it'll occur to you like a subtle signal. You'll be like, something will be like paying attention. If you don't focus on that, pay attention to that, you won't notice it. So, you want to practice subtle signals. And that's an example, a very coarse example. So we can teach kids to notice subtle signals, and it's a very central requirement of this ability to have insights. In the lab, they can actually tell people who are likely to have insights and not, through certain brain regions being more active than others, and it's this capacity. This is some kids at the school practicing noticing subtle signals there. Another thing that's very important is that you need to be okay with uncertainty, and this is a big one. This ability to notice subtle signals requires what you can think of as a quiet mind, which means not a lot of electrical activation. And here's where the trouble begins. Your limbic system really doesn't like uncertainty. Uncertainty creates a lot of noise, and you can't then simply hear the subtle signals. Your brain's always trying to decide if something's good or bad. When you're not sure what it is, your brain goes a little bit nuts and you literally can't focus. So this is a really central capacity, being okay with uncertainty, and it does seem to be both genetic and something trainable. It does seem to be a combination of things. There's some studies in the lab showing that as people have more anxiety, there's anxiety on the bottom there, as people are literally more anxious, the number of insights they have goes down, and as they're happier, the number of insights they have actually goes up. And there's lots and lots of studies showing that you're much more likely to notice these subtle signals if you're able to reduce that anxiety and be okay with uncertainty. Okay, so in the school, we're practicing a couple of things at the moment. You may have heard of glow time. If you've been to the school and enjoyed that, it's a wonderful thing. It's kind of really weird and wacky and uncertain, but it's not just about fluoro. It's actually about being okay with experiencing whatever's happening. And recently, with the new Provocateur initiatives, we've got Wacky Wednesday, where just things are kind of wacky and the kids don't know what it is and they've got to find out what it is that's unexpected. So being okay with uncertainty is a very, very important function. Again, we think that's trainable. The third piece that's very big is that kids should be understanding people a lot better than they do now. There should be a field of study called human studies, where they're learning about how change happens, what happiness is, how the brain works, how economics and politics work. There should be a field that's exploring that. This has been something that's probably the most useful thing I've ever produced, and it's right at the very end of my fourth book, my last work, and it's probably the most meaningful thing I've done. It's simply describing and summarizing everything we've learned about the brain in relation to the social world, coming out of social neuroscience. And what it says is simply that the brain classifies everything into either a possible reward that you're going to approach or move toward, or a possible threat to stay away from. And the brain does this with food and other things. But we do this in the social world with status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness. And there's a lot more I could say about this, but essentially, we're classifying every situation as either good for our status or threatening for our status. It's going to make us look good, or it's going to make us, look slightly bad. And when we feel like any of these are going to go down, it feels like a danger to our life, so we avoid it. Okay, autonomy is a sensation of having some control. Relatedness is this sense of friend or foe. And fairness is a sense, of a fair exchange. Now, when any of these are in the negative, you're activating your limbic system, and as you activate your limbic system, you're deactivating and literally reducing the resources for executive function and for insight. So you literally can't think, can't learn, can't really focus as these threat responses go up. So what we've been able to do through the NeuroLeadership Institute and through the studies and my own work is find the patterns and be able to then educate kids and be able to teach kids about this. But this is tremendously useful if you want to know how to create change, because if you try to create change in others, you often accidentally threaten other people's status. You often accidentally create a lot of uncertainty, and people feel like they have no autonomy. So you really want to understand these things. If you're going to understand change, you understand people, you also need to learn the tools of being a change agent. And it's wonderful to see this, very much a part of the Blue School curriculum. There's media and film and even public speaking, learning how to do stand-up. I'm looking forward to the stand-up classes at some point in the future. Learning how to communicate in a way that moves people in whatever technologies of the day is very important. Here's a big one that's kind of important and very resonating for me lately, is that you need to actually develop, there we go, grit. You need to develop a lot of resilience and courage. Now, I don't know if that's exactly grit, but one of the things I've discovered is sort of unfortunate, this kind of dark side of positive change, is that you tend to get the most violent and aggressive reactions back when you're trying to facilitate a positive change in the world. Have you noticed that? They are, the positive change seems to get them. Isn't that strange? Have you ever wondered? Well, it's a fact of life, and I just recently started to understand why. If you've got a positive change, what you tend to do is be so overexcited about it that you don't tend to take care of how you present it. And in a sense, the message becomes, I've got such a great idea that you're literally an idiot if you don't do exactly what I say. And you're threatening actually status and autonomy and probably certainty. Whereas, and the other thing is it's very, very uncertain. New ideas that are transformational are very uncertain. They're not, a linear thing. They're like totally different. The brain hates uncertainty. Whereas, bad ideas tend to just be an, increment of the past. So new ideas are very, very different. They create a lot of uncertainty, and we tend to present them badly. Whereas, if you're going to give someone a needle, what do you say? You say, "Oh, I'm really sorry about this. This is really going to hurt. I just, just brace yourself, right?" But if you're giving them a lolly, you're going to say, "Why aren't you eating the lolly?" So we think that the positive ideas we have are going to be accepted, and we actually get a strong threat. So kids need to understand this and actually learn how to develop resilience and courage around creating change. It's a very, very important thing. And so for me, Provocateur is not just learning to come up with fantastic art, it's also follow through and facilitating this long term. How could this work in school? Well, it's pretty simple to me. Teachers at the start are going to create provocative experiences. I'll share one in a moment. They need to explore the science and the language of change and teach that to kids. They should be studying great provocateurs. They should be watching TED videos, which they are in some schools. And then they also need to be practicing provocations. The kids need to get out and build grit by practicing provocations in whatever way they're going to do. Now, I want to spend my last minute and a half just sharing with you a provocation that's happening at Blue Man and at Blue School, and it's pretty simple. Meet Mr. Sneaky. This is a letter that a teacher named Katie T wrote to Chris Wink and I about the new initiative that they're doing at the school, and it's literally in her voice, slightly edited. Mr. Sneaky emerged from a scavenger hunt idea I had. I looked for materials for inspiration, found lots of fabric, and cut out 25 hearts. I hung them in sneaky spots all over the school and wrote a letter to each class asking the kids to look around and see if they could find them. I said I'd be back the following week and introduced myself as Mr. Sneaky, which I signed the letter. The teachers told me the kids were having a hard time getting excited about learning because they were afraid of risk. So we came up with this plan of how Mr. Sneaky could make learning more fun. One day, Mr. Sneaky, which was me, walked into Katie T, walked into the class with a trench coat, a hat, a fake mustache as eyebrows, looking very crazy, bushy eyebrows, with this huge magnifying glass looking through, and pretending the kids didn't notice me. This is in Katie's voice. I didn't speak the entire time I was with the children. I accidentally dropped a large envelope with a question mark. One of the children ran up to pick up the envelope and brought it to the teachers. Should we open it, they asked. The teachers looked at me and I replied with a silent shrug. They decided to open it and found a two-part letter to the teacher with puzzle pieces. The teachers read the first part of the letter aloud and the children each took one puzzle piece. Before long, they found out the puzzle was a map to the school. The map had an X to mark the location of the next clue. The kids ran to the bathrooms and began looking high and low for something, anything. They found another package with a question mark. They brought it back. Inside the package was an envelope for each child with his or her name on it. There was one word in there. The children had to work together to make a sentence that made sense. It was a message from Mr. Sneaky about their next clue. Mr. Sneaky had also asked the children to write out the sentence in their neatest handwriting in the notebook. Once the children began to work, Mr. Sneaky quietly left the room. After school, the teachers found me, said the kids were so excited about the writing and making sure it was nice for Mr. Sneaky. It was an incredible success and one of the richest teaching moments I've had at Blue School so far. I can see this thread lasting for a while. I am very excited, exclamation mark, exclamation mark. Now, how do we create schools where that kind of thing is not just possible but encouraged and supported? To me, there's a very basic question we need to answer. What is the purpose of education? Is it to create good consumers? Maybe some schools, not the one I want to be involved with. Is it to create happy kids? Well, that's important as well. If it's actually to create a better world, if it is to create a better world, then we better teach kids the art and science of creating a better world. Because as someone involved in that, I can tell you it's really not that easy. We need to give them the tools, the capacity, the art and the science and the practice of doing this. And as we do this, we'll be creating provocateurs and hopefully leaving the world a little bit better as well. Thank you very much.